What does it mean to buy a home in a floodplain? I'm Lindsay Vallandigham with the Symphony Group at Keller Williams Louisville East. We serve the greater Louisville community on both sides of this great Ohio River. We are so blessed to live in a part of the country where we have great access to beautiful scenery, including our beautiful waterways like the Ohio River here. But we all know that with massive amounts of water like this becomes a great risk of flooding. And Jefferson County and greater metro Louisville area is no stranger to flooding. In fact, 1 in 5 properties along the banks of this Ohio River faces a flood risk. We have Beargrass Creek and all of its tributaries. We have low-lying areas south and west of downtown Louisville that are all subject to a flood plain. And what does that mean? The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, is responsible for designing maps that indicate where our floodplains are. They are based around huge bodies of water like this one right here at the Ohio River. FEMA's maps will indicate that an area is in a 100-year floodplain or a 500-year floodplain. But what does that really mean? Well, it's not what you might think. A 100-year floodplain means that there's a 1% chance that a property could experience flooding. A 500-year floodplain means that there's a 0.2% chance that a property could experience flooding. So as you can see, the higher number of years of the floodplain, the lower the risk of flooding. If you see something that has a 30-year floodplain, for example, that's going to have an extremely high risk of flooding. Over time, these maps can change. Every time we have a major flood event here in greater metro Louisville, those flood maps are changing because FEMA is coming in and determining where that flood water rose to and how it affects the properties in that area. So these maps are constantly changing. What are the risks then of purchasing a home in the floodplain? Number one is that flood insurance. The National Flood Insurance Program requires flood insurance for properties that are located in a floodplain where a mortgage is utilized. That flood insurance is definitely going to have an expense that you need to make sure that you're budgeting for. The second risk is the risk of property value. Your property in a floodplain is always going to have a lower value than your neighbor's property that isn't located in a floodplain. Third, there's the risk of property damage. Your home existing in a floodplain is not a guarantee that it's going to flood. Like we talked about, there's a 100-year floodplain, and in a 100-year floodplain, it's a 1% chance risk that it floods. But if you do have a flood, that property damage can be expensive. And finally, there is the risk that the National Flood Insurance Program subsidies will end. Right now, the NFIP is underwriting the cost for primary homeownership flood insurance. And that flood insurance could become very expensive if the NFIP ultimately elects to remove that subsidy for our primary homeowners. So how can we help you mitigate that risk? First up, know your floodplain information. Know exactly which floodplain your property falls in. And when you're looking at properties, get a sense for what's the flood history of that property and what's happened in the past to really help you know and understand how great your flood risk is in purchasing that property. Next, you want to make sure that you budget for flood insurance. Flood insurance is going to be required if you have a mortgage, and therefore you need to reach out to your insurance provider and find out what the added cost of flood insurance is going to be if you're looking at a house in a floodplain. Next, you need to know your mitigation options. If you ultimately decide to purchase a home in a floodplain that might potentially flood, you might want to get ahead of things by looking at options like flood vents, sump pumps, waterproofing, and French drains. These can help protect your property, your greatest asset, from the water that comes in from the outside. And lastly, and this is the biggest opportunity for a realtor to step in and help you, so you need to make sure that your purchase price reflects the risk that you are now carrying and that potential added costs of home ownership, of living in a floodplain. At the Symphony Group, we are well versed in the flood risks in the greater Louisville metro area, and we will be in lockstep beside you to help you determine where floodplain homes are located if you choose to stay away from the floodplain, and how, if you choose to to save a little money, get a better deal, and purchase a home in a floodplain, how you can best mitigate your risk and get the best deal possible for your new home. For more information, reach out to us at SymphonyRealtyGroup@gmail.com.